Creating a network connecting solar batteries to communicate with the grid. Okay, solar batteries, a utility grid, and creating a network so they can talk to each other. You don't hear that often, but it looks like you soon will. Today we talk with Jake Thompson, a network engineer at Twin State Technical Services, who explains about their involvement with a green energy project for the Rock River Lumber and Grain Company. Today on Small Business Talks. I think most people think that when you do a solar installation and you go with batteries, you just set everything up and plug it in. And that's not the case. Apparently, you need to have a network built into the system. And with me today is Jake Thompson from Twin State Technical Services to not only tell us about a project they worked on, but also how networks work and how they communicate with things that we normally wouldn't think they would. So hi, Jake. How you doing?
I'm very well, Neil. Thank you for having me.
Oh, glad to have you. Glad to have you on the podcast. So let's talk solar array, battery backup solar arrays, and networking.
Yeah.
I got to tell you right off the bat, that's one of those things that when I heard it, it's sort of like, okay, it's solar energy and it's a battery and we have to network it. So tell me, is that something that's common? Tell me a little bit about.
It's not a common application for Twin State. That was our first go around, I'll tell you. We were contracted with one of our clients that reached out to us and said, hey, we're going to need some help here. Apparently their system needs to be talking to the public internet, and they need some help with that. So we were the ones to come in, hook up some network to big battery, a little bigger than a car battery, obviously, and get them access to the public internet, and they can send power out to the grid. It's a pretty cool process.
So tell me a little bit about the project. So we had some battery arrays, and if you want to just kind of start from the beginning, how did this project develop, and what did you do?
Yeah. So Rock River Lumber and Grain, who's one of our clients, they are headquartered in Prophetstown, Illinois. About 5 or 6 years ago, they put in one of the largest solar arrays in Whiteside County at the time. There's bigger ones put in now just because of the solar boom, I'm going to call it. But they put in, it was probably a half a mile long, I'm going to call it. It might be even longer than that. They have a grain facility out in Sterling that operates as a rail terminal. That's where they offload all their grain. They put this solar array in just to combat some costs, get some energy built up for themselves. The battery was an afterthought, actually. They put the solar array in to feed their on-site power during the solar hours. Obviously, you can't do it during night. So at that time, we were able to put in some networking so that they could monitor the operations of the panels. When sun is hitting those panels, they can see the power generated. Later, about 2 years after that, Moxie came to them or something along those lines that, hey, we have this battery opportunity. We can install on your site. The solar panels can charge those batteries during operation. And then when the grid needs power, they can pull off of those batteries in a stored format. So they're taking stored energy, pushing it out to all the local residences, businesses, to the grid. And it's just a way for them to keep the frequency correct on the grid, I'm going to call it.
Okay.
In order to do that, someone has to come into the network and say, hey, I want that power. And that you do that over the internet. And different tools and equipment needed, but that's it in a nutshell. So if you're that controller, you're sitting at your house, you can say, hey, I need power. Let's send some out. And they take it from the battery, and it's hardly ever seen on site. So that was kind of it.
Okay. So basically the task was, how do we get the battery to talk to the network or to talk to the power grid is what it sounds like.
Right.
So how'd you go about solving that? And
there's a few different challenges in the whole operation. One, there's not a square building on the on the property. Basically, it's a very small office, and they've got about 6 or 7 grain bins that are over 500,000 bushel. They made them be 750. Perspective wise, one semi load is 1,000 bushels, so you can put over 500,000 semi loads in these bins. They're huge. The solar array was at one end, the battery was in the middle, and they had to be connected somehow to the DMARC, which is where we send our internet out to the world. The way we did that, we had to mount devices called point-to-point. It basically is a wireless connection between where we want to send data to the solar panels or to the battery backups. And you just mount this radio antenna up as high as you can, so there's no interference, and you point it as close as you can, line of sight to, we did one to the solar panels to look at that data, and then we had to run another point-to-point to the other end of the property to look at the batteries. So they're just run on frequencies and different electronic megahertz and stuff like that send signal one way, send it back, we can read it, and then we can get out of the internet. That was at least on site. We had some firewall changes and policies that we had to put in place so that we could have security on it. No one outside world could get into it, only the organization that wants to control those batteries, and those were put in place as well.
What would you say was probably the biggest challenge you had out of any of all these things? It sounds like there were a lot, but I'm just thinking, was there one in particular that sticks in your mind that, wow, this was something we really had to overcome, or we really had to kind of go a different way of doing it?
Sure, yeah. Actually, the equipment setup, I could problem solve that on the fly, that we know where we needed to put them and how to get the wires there. The biggest challenge is knowing where to plug those wires into the device. We didn't have a lot of direction from Tesla. These are Tesla branded batteries. There was then a third-party contractor that installed the device. He didn't have the schematics that I needed to know where to plug in. And so the hardest challenge was trying to find someone to tell me where to plug our stuff into, which seems really uncanny. And I found it by accident, found a Tesla support number on the device somehow by accident, and finally got someone to say, yes, you're plugged into the wrong port. You just need to plug it into LAN 2, which is local area network. And everything was copacetic after that.
Very cool. So compare this to what would you call like a typical network setup, and how different was this compared to like something of a typical setting up a network for, let's say, just an office building or for a small company?
Sure. The similarities would be every building that has internet has a point of entry, which we call the DMARC. That's the point where the internet provider comes in, plugs into a piece of equipment, and then it becomes our responsibility after that. And that was the case at this facility. They had a firewall, internet came in. However, that firewall was at another location. It's separate from the Sterling rail site where the batteries were. So we had to route policies from one ISP to another through our firewall, and work with a separate internet service provider, ISP, to manage their tunnels appropriately with the correct addresses and carry different packets back to the firewall so they could get out. Yeah, that was one of the big challenges too.
That sounds like it. So is this is interesting, because I like the way of how you approached it and how you kind of overcame and figured out how to put all these different things together. Again, this is a typical service that Twin State does, is setting up networks.
Correct. So Twin State has 3 different departments. We have networking, web development, and web programming. Networking handles all of that kind of things with firewall, packet transfer, routing different traffic where we need it to go. So internet comes in, we handle everything on the backside. We say, okay, this internet coming in is this person. We need to route it over to this device, which happened to be the battery, which is in a sense similar to your computer. It's just working in the opposite direction. So you have internet to your house. Obviously, we're talking over a network right now. Your computer is talking out to the internet saying, I want to get data to come in. Well, we wanted data to go out. So in a typical company, you would have all these computers, they route to a server, packets come in through the firewall, they're throughout their network, goes to your computer, says, yep, I'm here. Now, we wanted someone from the outside to talk to this device. So that device data has to go out, talk to someone, hey, I need some power, pull it out. So essentially it's the same packets, it's just different data in the transfer.
Okay.
Hopefully that makes sense. I don't want to get too techie on you, I guess.
No. That's great, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners are going to fully understand that a lot more than I'm going to on that area. I think it's fascinating, and that's why I want to know more about like the whole networking and how you go about this, because I think the average person just thinks of a network as, I'm plugging my computer in and I've got a server, I've got Wi-Fi. It's that kind of thought. And this is that whole thing of like going outside that element and taking a real world example and applying a network to be able to get things to actually communicate.
Yeah, right. This is not networking 101 by any means. It's not plugging your Netgear router into your modem and hooking to your Wi-Fi and putting your password in and going. There's a lot of bits and pieces that have to be connected simultaneously, and they all have to work in unison. So we have to make sure that firewalls and policies are in place, the firmware is patched so that there's no exploits coming into this data or this network. And there's a lot of bits and pieces. So yeah.
No, that's great. And I think the reason I also bring that up is because do you think this is something, since there's more of a push towards green energy and solar panels are going to be more, is this something you see that is going to pick up, that people are going to need this awareness or even this understanding and this service to be able to communicate, with like the batteries to the network and things like that? Do you see a growth in that area?
I do. If you just drive in a 100-mile radius, you'll see solar panels everywhere. I mean, they're taking out farm ground that you're going to be cash renting or pulling crops off, and they're putting in solar farms. They just are going crazy. And they're stuck in the middle of nowhere, so they have the most sun. There's no trees, flat ground. Somehow they got to talk to those as well, and that's pretty much exactly what we did. We just had it over a couple different locations, couple of obstructions in the way that we had to navigate around, but essentially it's the same thing. You're going to put a device on site, you're going to reach out to it, whether it be cellular, whether it be internet, which that's a whole different ball of wax. Reach out to those equipment, talk to it, see what it's doing, get feedback. And yes, I do see that coming down the road for a lot of people.
I got to ask, when you mentioned about like logistics and about getting over obstacles, I'm guessing that a rail yard, and because I'm figuring this is rather narrow but really long, and you've got active railroad going on, right?
It is the main line of the North Pacific, I think, Northern Pacific or BNSF, one of those two. There's two main lines right next to it. So the trains, they route right off of that main line and they get loaded with corn and go back out. Now, the device, the battery and the solar panel are both on the same side of the track. So you don't have to worry about that.
Okay.
But this terminal brings in probably anywhere from 100 to 200 trucks a day. They've got two dump pits that are live all day, 10 hours. And where the internet is and the battery, the trucks go in between there. So we had to make sure we were at least 14 feet in the air. The trucks are 13.6. They have a safety rail that guys clip to with a harness, and they have to walk along the trains to open the doors to load them. So we were able to mount a bracket on that safety rail, shoot it across the truck traffic over to the battery, and that gave us our high enough clearance that we weren't going to get any interference.
All that's going through my mind right now is this is obviously something, if you have a solar panel, don't try this yourself. Hire a professional is what it sounds like, because
yeah, that's
well, I don't mean that to be an advertisement, but I think it's important because, again, you're dealing with, the height of the trucks. You're dealing with, I would imagine, a variety of frequencies, because trucks are going to have, different radio signals and things like that. And it's just the whole planning of that whole thing and putting all the logistics, not just we need to connect this to this. Would you say it was like also adding in all these other factors that didn't make it just, well, we can just plug this right in and we're done? It was like, how do we overcome this? How do we overcome this? How do we overcome this? And it sounds like you had a few of those to handle.
Exactly. And the network was almost an afterthought from the design of the battery too, so that if they would have came to us before they put the battery in, we could have just ran our networking underground from one office through the trenches up into their device. They put all the conduit in they needed. They put all the wiring in underground. So it would have been really helpful to put a conduit in just straight hardwire. But since they didn't do that, that's where we had to go in the air. And then you get weather elements and wind and that kind of variables and obstacles that you got to overcome. So there could have been some forethought to that to make it a little bit better, but it's working great right now.
Now, do you do any other additional work, or was that just like a one time you just installed it, or are you continuing to work on the project?
I continue to work on that project. It's very minimal for that location. However, last week they did have a network switch go down. It actually took the battery out of service. It was right before Labor Day, so they were out of service for 5 days. It was on a Friday, of all things. Everything happens on a Friday or Saturday. But I do handle their services to this day, and I had to go out there, replace that switch, and it was all good. But we also handle all of their server setup, their wireless, their email, making sure everything is up to date. If they have new computers, we build those out, that kind of stuff. They have 9 locations, which 7 of them are elevators, and they've got 3 lumber yards. So there's 2 different domain networks there that we have to separate, but also tie together through different pathways around the internet. And yeah, we handle those on a daily basis.
Okay.
Now, Twin State would handle a one-off project like that. If someone came to us, we would look at the project, see if we can do it. It's not that they had to be our customer, but we are their service provider and they asked us to do it and we took care of it.
Well, I'm thinking this is also a question for people that when they're listening to this, that they're going to get into solar. And I think you've pointed a couple things out. So I'm just going to redirect the question and say, let's say I'm a company and I am getting into solar and I'm going to have batteries and all that. If somebody were to come to you, what is the advice that you'd give them in setting this up? What are things that they should be bringing to you that will make this an easy and smooth transition for them to be able to get this installed and have a network applied with their solar batteries?
Yeah, the biggest thing would be, let's make the networking a forethought rather than an afterthought. As I said before, there's a lot of detail that, being in the expert of the field, not calling myself an expert by any means, but it's a very technical field. We understand a lot of the nuances that need to be involved in the project. Your project engineer for the battery might not know that. They're more concerned with getting the power to the battery, connecting it to their solar array. They really don't think about, okay, how am I going to send this, or send this power out to the grid? And if you're going to go through that, make sure it's part of your project plan to get networking involved prior to the build. Do it in the design. Make sure you know where it's going. Make sure you know where it's coming from. Just give us the details, and we can do a lot of the legwork after that. But then you're not scrambling at the end. We were waiting. That was like our last step in getting this thing up and running, was the networking, because we weren't involved in the beginning.
But that sounds like that's something like people that want to get into this, they really should get in touch with a company like yours and kind of lay it out and just say, we can help you, do the proper planning. And that's what it really sounds like it comes down to, is proper planning and doing things in the right order. Otherwise, it's going to be a lot harder if you put something in and then try to adapt to it later on.
That's exactly right. It's like baking a batch of cookies. You're not going to put them in the oven before you mix them up, kind of thing. But
I like that. That's a great example. That's a great analogy. I like that.
Yeah, and it's just, you got to think about everything, and sometimes it doesn't. We roll with the punches here. We solve a lot of problems on a daily basis, and that one was one of them.
Well, that sounds great. I'm going to leave you with to give a summary. I'll give you the last talk on this. Just give me a summary of what, how you felt the project started, what you did, and what you learned out of it. Let me put it that way.
Definitely learned a lot about point-to-point devices, understanding the right equipment for the job. There's multiple point-to-point devices out there, but we needed a little bit of special ones to handle not having to go plug 110 power in. That's kind of detailed information, but also being able to understand all the language that another company coming in has. I've never dealt with power schematics and any of that, so learning how to read those and then tie them into our network was really cool. Again, it would be nice to have been a forethought rather than an afterthought, as I said. However, having Rock River as a client and that relationship, they were able to reach out to us and give us as much information as they could. They were very good with that. And then sometimes you got to be lucky, and I found information to get some stuff going, but that was very fun. And another really good exercise to make sure you have the right equipment at the front end, the DMARC, as I said before. If you don't have the right firewall in place, this was never going to happen. You can't come in here with a Walmart Netgear or something you buy on Amazon. It's a very sophisticated piece of device. It's like its own separate computer. And make sure you have the right security. So don't want to cut corners doing those equipment. You want to make sure you get what exactly you need.
Well, it sounds like it was a success.
It was. It's still a success to this day, and Rock River is very happy. They're sending power out. They're helping the environment and getting a little bit of kickback for it. So it's very good.
So if anybody is listening and they kind of say, this is something I'm kind of interested in, how would they get in touch with you?
So Twin State main office phone number is 563-441-1504. You can also go to our website, tsts.com. That's tomsam.com. I know that's sometimes hard to understand. And you can see all of our different networking, web design, and networking staff. We've got our links there, some info. Sign up for our newsletter. It's all there. So
great. Well, Jake, thank you very much for showing us, how this all is put together and giving us some lessons on if we're going to be connecting, some ideas and some recommendations for doing that. And thank you for being on the podcast. Appreciate it.
I appreciate it, and thanks for having me. This was actually my first podcast ever, so thanks.
You did great. In fact, I'll even open that up. I one thing we always want our listeners to know is that if you have any questions or comments, we ask you, give us, post a comment or post a review and let us know how we did, and we definitely will put that on the website as well. We'll also put your phone number and web address on the down below on the podcast as well.
We would appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jake.
All right. Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.